Right now, let's go out to the D&M Leasing Hotline. Welcome to the program. One of the best. By the way, a superstar in the making. Yeah. I mean, if he wasn't a superstar already, you saw him on The Gambler.
Yeah, you did.
You saw him on The Gambler. I'm surprised there's probably an invoice coming to us after we have him on. The one, the only from Blogging the Boys, Mr. RJ Ochoa. And RJ, I guess number one, what's your shock value right now, now that we're a few hours removed from the Micah Parsons trade?
It's great to be with you guys. I'm doing this appearance pro bono, so don't say I don't have a heart. I'll say that the fan crew, I count myself among the Tolos and, really listen intently to what you guys are saying. And I had, within the last 24 hours, I'd say, shifted, what I viewed to be the most likely result of this whole saga. And number one on my sort of thought process was that he would inevitably be traded. I like a lot of people, had kind of planted my thought flag in it happening in the spring after this season, maybe doing the back injury dance all season long. I will say I thought this was the least possible thing of all possible permutations that he would get traded, before week one, let alone today, was pretty stunning. And it is actually kind of funny that all the internet rumors were right, that we kind of just like laughed off and shrugged off, said, oh, no, it's if he gets traded, it won't be the Packers. It'll be some AFC team or something like that. So that's kind of amplifying the shock for me. It all feels very surreal. This is one of the stranger days in Dallas Cowboys history, and certainly it's one of the stranger days since I've been covering the team professionally.
RJ, do you agree with Jerry Jones when he made the claim that I didn't know if he was going to go this far? He said the team is better without Micah Parsons and with the addition of Kenny Clark.
Look, I've coped myself into a lot of things. I mean, a lot. I feel for Kenny Clark. I'm not a Mavericks fan. I'm a Spurs fan. So this is my first kind of, deep cut like this. I don't park my car in the same garage as all of you or most of you. And I worry for Kenny Clark that he's going to get Anthony Davis. Everyone's going to kind of just hate him for a little while because he's associated with this. I certainly think, I saw Newey Scruggs tweet that, Kenny Clark was better than Mozzie Smith. And, I mean, well, yeah. It's like
hot take.
Right, exactly. And so did the Cowboys get better at defensive tackle today? Sure. I mean, fine. Or is that the question? Yeah, obviously. But, they took like 12 steps back to take that one step forward. I know you've got to say what you've got to say when you're in that position. I just, I don't know anyone who, has a sound mind that believes it in any kind of way.
See, I guess, look, I don't know that they necessarily took 12 steps back. I really, really don't. And I've seen a couple people talk about how, maybe this means more about how shoddy is perceived in the room, and you wonder if maybe he's wielding a little bit more power as far as, control, not necessarily control over the roster,
just
but
to say,
yeah, look, I feel like Shoddy's definitely put his foot down more so than, say, than a Mike McCarthy ever did. And you just wonder, and Bobby Belt talked about this when we had him on just a little bit ago, that I'm not going to say that it was the final straw, but you had a lot of folks on the coaching staff and some of the players were not too happy when he was laying on the table in the last preseason game.
Well, first of all, Bobby's a fraud and a loser, and I don't trust anything that he has to say. But in all seriousness, sure, maybe laying on the table, rub people the wrong way. Jerry said in the presser that he believes that David Mulugeta is not fragile enough that their relationship would be compromised in the name of negotiating with George Pickens. I would hope that nobody is so fragile that Micah's laying on the table would, just push him out the door. And the reason I get what you're saying, and I understand maybe it's not quite 12 steps back, I do think it is from a disposition standpoint. And I don't mean to, take shots at anybody, but I don't view this as anybody putting their foot down. If we were having this conversation, in the middle of April, and you guys said, hey, guys, you come on because they just traded Micah right now, I would totally believe it. I would be willing to walk that walk with you and say, yeah, you know what? Brian clearly walked in, took a look at things and said, this guy can't be somebody who I work with, and they're going to follow him. But the fact that they came this far, a week from now, the first game will almost be over. And so it just, none of it smells like it was part of any kind of plan. If I have to make one guess, and it is admittedly a guess, not based on any kind of information, it's that, feelings got involved and feelings got hurt, and maybe they were compromised by laying on the trainer's table. But I in no way personally am buying that this was some declaration of power or you have to do things our way because, I mean, they traded the guy on August 28th.
RJ, when it comes to this new look Dallas Cowboys with no longer having number 11 from Harrisburg and having Kenny Clark, what does the Cowboys' near future, the next 3 years, look like? Obviously, they loaded up on draft picks now. You got 2 in the 26 draft, 2 in the 27 draft. Jerry hinted at maybe trading one of those picks for a player. You got Dak on a big contract, CD on a big contract. What do the Cowboys look like now with all this new money and no Micah Parsons?
I think that defensively, you know, I was always giving them a benefit of the doubt because of Micah specifically. I mean, with all due respect, I know we like a lot of players and we're, you know, high on some players' potential. I mean, the entire defense got worse.
Correct.
And you know, there's just no way of denying that. So it is painful how much, you know, Dak Prescott is kind of living the same life that Tony Romo lived. And this feels very circa 2012, 2013, excuse me, when they had no defense to save their lives. And it just had to be Romo and Dez throwing them into games. And then they finally found some semblance of a run game. And by the time everything else had caught up, it was too late for Tony. And so, I mean, this feels, I mean, like, need I remind everyone that the last time they played football, you know, as far as a regular season as a whole without Micah was 2020. And that was one of the worst defenses that the Cowboys have ever fielded. Now, does Micah make that big of a difference? No. But now when we do the calculus of this all, they are now down. I mean, a week from now, they have to play a game without their 2 starting pass rushers from last year. You've got DeMarcus Lawrence gone in free agency. You obviously traded Micah Parsons. Is Dante Fowler enough to carry things opposite of pick who you want in the moment? I mean, nobody trusts Sam Williams, right? Everyone thinks he's going to have a penalty. Marshawn Nealon. I know we're pumped about Donovan Ezuraku. Like, this is, you know, it was always going to have to be an offensive team in a way, just because of the way the game works these days in the NFL. But it is truly going to have to be Dak, Stevie, and George Pickens carrying them on a week-to-week basis.
The one thing that Jerry did mention, though, and Steven mentioned this, was that, you know, the thing they feel about with Eberflus's defense is that you can scheme a pass rush. And, you know, look, his defenses have never had in the, I think 6 or 7 years that he's either been a DC or head coach of the Bears, he's never had a guy with more than 11 sacks. You know, and yet they were a halfway decent defense in Indianapolis and, you know, had a decent defense at the end of his Chicago run. Don't we think, though, that, you know, this team can be a middle-of-the-road defense with the kind of offense that you got?
Yeah, I mean, I would offer, though, we have no idea what this run game is going to look like. I mean, I think we think the passing game is going to be great, but the passing game is also somewhat dependent on, you know, this young offensive line finding itself. So, like, this house of cards was already, you know, pretty loose. And
it was.
To your point, like, it could totally stand the test of the regular season. But, I mean, this isn't – maybe it's not the house that, you know, the little piggy built out of straw, but it is the house that the little piggy built out of twigs, right? So,
built out of Dak.
Maybe maybe one huff and puff doesn't blow this down, but that second one, you know, Micah could have been that, you know, that extra twig or two to give you just that extra bit of stability, you know, across your team as a whole. You know, I saw a tweet a while ago, and I almost responded to it. Somebody saying, like, Micah, you know, people are now coping and whatever. Somebody said he was totally checked out of the season last year. And I almost responded and said, you know, let's go watch that Bengals game when they, you know, fought tooth and nail and almost won and had the special teams gaff at the end, and then he stormed off at the end of it. Like, I mean, one of the biggest reasons they were in all those games, you know, that Cooper Rush had to start was because of Micah Parsons. And I know he missed time, obviously, earlier in the year, but he was one of those handful of defensive players who could make up for not having a franchise quarterback and obviously amplify having one. So this, you know, I'm excited, I guess, about the run defense and Kenny Clark, and maybe Saquon Barkley will be held under 40 yards or something next week. But at a certain point, you know, someone's going to look around and go, man, you know, Micah Parsons would really help right now.
RJ, so do you see them trading Micah Parsons as a rebuild? And I know it's kind of nuanced because they're kind of half rebuild by trading your best player for picks, but you got Kenny Clark back, you got Dak still, you got CD. Where are the Cowboys looking at the draft and looking at an Arch Manning and looking to rebuild while also being competitive? If you had to pick their brain, what kind of mode are the Cowboys front office in right now for the future of this team?
The verbiage I used a lot last year is what I thought about when I did our live show about this a little while ago. they don't have a North Star. That's really how I feel about them. I mean, you can't, it's one thing if their North Star is something we disagree with, right? Maybe in any team, right? A team is tanking or a team is going for it, but every move they make is in that direction. And they're not doing that, right? Like the fact that they waited as long as they did to sign Dak last year, literally signing him in the most inefficient manner possible. The fact that they traded Micah at this point on, basically on the final day that they could is done in the most inefficient manner possible. So if they had moved on from Dak, if they hadn't signed him and right now they were starting like Justin Fields, who they signed in free agency, then I would totally be willing to say, okay, they're clearly rebuilding. They're clearly going to kind of restart this thing. They want to stock up on draft picks, whatever. But, by committing to Dak, they tell themselves, okay, we have this window. I mean, because Dak, you can like Arch Manning all you want, is the starting quarterback, at least through 2027. So you have now, hindered that window. So I feel like they're moving in different directions, and they're not necessarily polar opposites of one another, but they're magnetized towards things that have nothing to do with one another. You're half, moving forward and all in and trying to build around this window, and you're also half rebuilding and restocking for the future. It's nice to have multiple first-round draft picks, but, I mean, are they going to be here too late? Are you going to find your Zach Martin as Tony Romo's in the twilight of his career? Are you going to find your Zeke Elliott for Dak Prescott whenever it's too late for him? It kind of feels that way at this point.
All right, get you out of here with this, and you touched on it earlier, and I thought it was a great question that was asked. Look, we all know that, we don't all know, but us ball knowers do, that David Mulugeta represents George Pickens. If George goes out, and let's just have fun with this conversation. Let's say George goes out and balls as your number 2, goes over 1,000 yards and solidifies himself as like, hey, he might be that dude. He's not the problem child we all thought he was. What is that negotiation going to look like? And is there any way under God's green earth that George Pickens re-signs with the Cowboys next year?
If it were me, even if it weren't David Mulugeta, even if I was just Agent X or Agent Zero, if it was DeMarvion representing him, I would say he's got to be the highest paid receiver in the NFL. I mean, you can make an argument, and this didn't come to pass. But I said this. For full context, I was against the Pickens trade. I'm into it now, but just to show you where my cards were.
No, that's fair.
But even then, the moment after they made the trade, I said, okay, fine, I'm not for this. But they made the trade. The first thing they should do is extend him. And I said then, whenever it was months ago, I said, if you don't, he could have held out. On some level, George Pickens could have said, oh, that's awesome. You just traded for me. Well, I'm eligible for a new deal. I want it now. And you have already given me more leverage than I already have by trading a third-round draft pick from me. So I'm not even going to, take the field in your uniform, whether I'm wearing 13 or 3, until you give me a new deal. So he didn't do that, and they're very fortunate about that. And you can argue whatever you want, but I think if George Pickens balls out, he is going to ask, or his representation is going to ask, to be the highest paid receiver in the NFL, and the Cowboys will have very, very, very little ground to stand on.
Boy, so you mean to say we could have this David Mulugeta drama all over again next year? So I'll tell you what, at the very least, it gives us something to look forward to. RJ, real quick, for the folks that are not as plugged in as they need to be just yet, where can they find you on the socials and Blogging the Boys?
BloggingTheBoys.com, home for all of our coverage, myself and our fantastic staff. I'm on social basically everywhere at RJ Ochoa. Anywhere you consume any kind of content, just search for me. We can hang out. We can commiserate together. And I should leave on this note. I mentioned I'm not a Mavericks fan. I'm also not a Rangers fan. I'm a Houston Astros fan, and it's nice to see at least one team in Texas standing tall.
I knew there was going to be some Astros dig when it was all said and done. RJ, great stuff from you as always, my friend. Let's do this again soon.
Yeah, have a good one, guys. O'Doyle rules.
Appreciate you. The one, the only RJ Ochoa.